All of this is for the Empire, to eliminate the enemies who represented a threat to the Emperor and the people of the Empire, and there is no other reason for the existence of the Imperial Guard. The land of the future, where technology was highly advanced, did not signify hope for humans. On the contrary, due to endless wars caused by a lack of resources, it continued to be destroyed and humanity kept expanding to other planets. In the end, all life had perished on Earth due to an invasion by an unknown alien species, and the surviving humans in space wandered until they managed to find a planet similar to Earth. Humanity decided to name this new planet Novus. After the discovery, the condemned were sent across space, and with that, all the humans who had been lost in space began to gather on Novus, the Balado Federation, where countless alien species blended together, the Accretion Empire, which had a powerful army and soldiers with machine-like physiques, and the Holy Corinthian Alliance, with priests possessing energy and strength like metal fortresses. But Novus had nearly infinite resources, which once again caused humanity to fight endlessly to monopolize them. In the Accretion Empire, at the Guardian Machine Laboratory, the Imperial Accretia commander spoke with the young man, telling him he had bad luck because he would be the object of many comparisons. There, they needed to prove to His Majesty what they were capable of. Then, he stated that today would be a very important day for them, the apprentices. The young man affirmed that they would see who was truly unlucky. The apprentice's name was Lucas. The commander told him that he had better meet expectations. Confident, Lucas said it would be his destiny. His helmet, Lucas thought, he had to at least be able to dodge and block bullets, as that was the minimum requirement to be part of the Imperial Guard. He had completed all simulations in extreme situations. He was a soldier in training for the Imperial Guard, with special enhanced conditions thanks to reinforcement procedures and heightened senses. The opponents he was about to face were 5 death row prisoners equipped with cheap cybernetic gear. He said it would take only 10 seconds. Drawing his sword, he began decapitating the bandits at tremendous speed. This was his chance to leave a strong impression on the Imperial Guard. He wanted to feel worthy of high praise. With all his senses heightened, he killed all the bandits, surpassing his limits to be increasingly valued and treated as a treasure by them. After his test, the commander said he did not expect Lucas to use bullet trajectory control. The protagonist replied that he had just copied a guy who was there before him. The commander, surprised, remarked that for someone from an orphanage to know this ability was unusual. He expressed his approval and said he would give Lucas a gift. The protagonist was surprised that the commander wanted to give him a gift. As he looked at him, the commander placed his hand on the protagonist's eye and ripped it out. Smiling, the commander expressed his surprise and commented that Lucas had done very well in passing the pain tolerance test. He then gave him a mechanical eye. Holding back his pain, the protagonist said he was happy with the praise. In his quarters, he received a visit from a blonde-haired extra. The extra introduced himself and said he wanted to talk to him, but was ignored at first. Soon, however, the protagonist told him to come in. The extra said that Lucas had impressed him. The protagonist, addressing him as young master, said that this was not the place for compliments. By his aura alone, Lucas could tell he was from a noble house. However, he noticed that his way of speaking was not arrogant. The extra opened his palm and told Lucas to take it, saying that he had only come to give him that. The protagonist refused, but the extra told him, "You won't be able to train well tomorrow if you don't rest properly. You should know that mental strength cannot handle everything." The protagonist accepts and eats, and says that he also was not bad there. The extra points to his eye while saying he has a mechanical eye for combat, making it not difficult to calculate the trajectory. He says that the protagonist's actions were much more impressive. It seems that the commander also noticed you. An irregular, I suppose that is why he gave you a mechanical eye out of his own pocket. The protagonist says he put in a lot of effort during training. The prota says, "After all, nobility is excellent, while the lower classes are powerless. I cannot let such a rare opportunity pass as a low-class citizen." The blonde extra says, "Nobility and excellence. You may have passed the selection process, but you know that there are people who did not pass. right? I bet there are people who paid to manipulate the results. The protagonist asks if result manipulation is possible. The blonde affirms he has no proof but firmly believes in this hypothesis. Those like you, without any support system, have never failed in the advanced soldier cultivation process, because that means you got here solely with your ability. The protagonist thinks, I did not expect to hear a noble say that not all nobles are excellent. Never thought about what that means for him. The blonde once again extends his hand and says, his name is Luca, to the protagonist, and says, I believe that people like you are the ones who should succeed. Says he is rooting for him. They shake hands. The protagonist, with a serious look, says that it is all for the Empire. But we see Luca's face not so content after the protagonist salutes the Empire. The protagonist trains his aim with his new eye, which improves his accuracy 1,000,000 times over. Shocked, Luca praises him, saying that after he manages to shoot everything in the target's head, he is definitely one of the best students, and asks if he has fully gotten used to the eye after the transplant, and says it is unfair that he is so good with a gun when you are specialized in hand-to-hand combat. The protagonist says it is natural for members of the Guard to be good with all types of weapons, and says that he does not want to hear that from someone who managed to put all the shots in the same hole. Luca, feeling smug, chuckles and says that this is just the result of someone specialized with weapons. The protagonist comments that if he keeps being so careless, he threatens to eventually surpass him. Luca says he will be happy if that really happens, and says that he will support him, and says that the Empire needs people like him, and says that the value of skill and talent is diminishing in the Empire. As long as someone has status and power, they can become talented. However, if more irregulars with natural talent like you start to appear, don't you think that soon people will be able to distinguish between those who have talent and those who do not? The prota says that it sounds like you are criticizing the imperial system. If I were to report exactly what you said to headquarters, you wouldn't be able to escape, even being a Karthika. But smiling, Luca says, if you were really going to do that, you wouldn't have told me in the first place. I already know that you are a good person. The protagonist thanks him for worrying about him. They go on a mission, and the commander announces that they will act as platoon leaders for their teams. Inside the truck filled with trainees, he asks if any of them have any objections. He returns to the main orders and says that on the other side of the canyon, there is an outpost illegally stationed in their territory, and this training is to prove their skills in the field. And with a terrifying look, the commander says that there is no need for prisoners, so they must kill everyone. Luca says that this is their first official mission. The protagonist asks if he is nervous and states that he has already killed people during training. Luca says that this is the first time they are facing an external force. Luca says that the Belatian Federation, the Korite Holy Alliance, even the Accretion Empire has as ancestors the humanity of planet Earth. There is no need to get lost in your emotions. The prota asks what he thinks. Does anyone here think that the veteran guards are here to protect us? These are the Legion full-body mechanical armors. The prota says that of course they are here to monitor us. They might even kill us if we try to take someone prisoner. I agree that idiots who are unaware of their place do not belong in the Imperial Guard. On planet Novus, other forces are just insects of the Empire. We learned that everyone there uses and deceives the Empire for their own benefit. Luca, a little tense, uses his eye and says, "That's what they taught us. It looks like none of the Alcarans are armed. This training should end without problems." While the mission goes as planned, the protagonist comes across a small boy who was crying over the destruction that the protagonist's team had devastated the bandit facility. The protagonist stared at the boy, looking at him. He notices that the boy is so scared that he cannot even move, a non-combatant without resistance. If I had a weapon, but seeing the scene of the boy crying, unfortunately, the protagonist remembers that the commander had said they could not bring prisoners and had to kill everyone. Placing the blade beside the boy, the protagonist thinks they are just insects draining the Empire's supplies. He is already as if he were dead, but he hesitates to do his job and thinks that the boy could live then. However, the protagonist thinks he should not dwell on this. If the general knew, he does not know what would happen to him. He turns and leaves the boy. But what he did not expect was Luca, who shot the boy. The protagonist, in his armor, is paralyzed and wonders how long Luca had been watching him. Luca, he thinks, will not report it. However, if any of the other trainees saw, then an explosion happens where Luca is. The protagonist is surprised. The mage who caused the explosion appears, but somehow Luca survives and leaps toward the mage with his blades. However, even with his back turned, the mage casts more magic against him mid-air. The protagonist is surprised to see a force user there. The young force user shouts that this is not a base, but a settlement, and that they do not kill unnecessarily, only what is necessary to survive. He wonders if the commander knew this. On the ground, with almost his entire body destroyed, Ile, lying down, says, "Luca, I let my guard down. I have no excuses." The protagonist thinks, "My hesitation caused this problem." He recalls training countless times on how to deal with a force user. He resolves to do whatever is necessary to fix his mistake. He immediately orders that he will handle everything alone and dismisses everyone back to the base. They all follow the order and disperse. The force user does not intend to let the protagonist escape and also prepares to launch magic against him. The protagonist realizes that he is probably only acting to allow his allies to escape. For a force user to wield power similar to magic, prior preparation is needed. In his case, making hand movements. The user begins firing magic at the protagonist. The protagonist prefers a battle of attrition, but he is given no choice. His body will collapse first if he continues to perform high-speed maneuvers. He needs to attack quickly, faster and faster. As he is about to reach the user, the force user lands a direct hit on the protagonist's helmet, shattering it instantly, making him see death before him. However, at the last moment, the force user hesitated to put more power into his magic, as he saw the protagonist's face and hesitated because he was just a boy, giving the protagonist the chance to take his life. On the ground, with a sword plunged into his chest, the protagonist realizes that if the attack had continued, he would have died. He thinks that the enemy organization is forming fanatical and irrational people. He questions why the force user hesitated to kill him, and remembers that his organization has the motto of not letting emotions consume them during battle. All for the Empire, killing those who threaten the security of the Emperor and the people of the Empire, is the reason for the existence of the Imperial Guard. Hospital at the accretion facilities, recovery room. In his recovery chamber, the protagonist is questioned by the blonde one, who asks how he feels about almost dying. The protagonist tells Ile that it was he who almost died. Ile starts laughing and says that this time he has new arms and legs, asking how much the protagonist had to replace. Another says that his sword was destroyed, so he received a new titanium one. The protagonist says that he, too, will end up with a completely new body. Ile asks if the chief knew that there was a force user there. Ile explains that the reason they had not heard anything about it was because it was a test. Another comments that they saw how the superiors did not take a step to help. They probably thought they could handle the situation. Isn't it strange? I and the other cadet who took the direct force attack survived. It's very strange to say it was all a coincidence. Maybe that force user never intended to kill us from the beginning, Ile recalls when the force user hesitated. However, the protagonist thinks that, as a warrior, letting him live was a mistake on his part. That pathetic mercy is the reason why the Korean ended up extinct. He shudders at the mere thought of his comrades dying. Ile asks, "Luca, why did you close that girl's eyes, Karan?" The protagonist says that Ile talks too much and turns away. Putting his hand on his head, he says it was just a mistake that will not happen again. One of the commanders announces that they have completed the mission, marking the completion of 4 years of training in the Imperial Guard. There are younger groups than you now, so be a model for these new recruits. The first ones, Luca and Ile, as the best, are somewhat of an example for these young ones. They understand. The Imperial Guard is organized in a rather simple manner. 1,000 guards are divided into 10 sentries, all commanded by a chief. The commander of the guard is the chief, as well as the belt of the first belt. The cadet, like the protagonist, after completing full body mechanization, are assigned to the lower belt of the 10th belt, becoming a belt and part of the 10th cycle. The protagonist exchanges punches with Ile. The powerful blows clash against each other. The protagonist notices that he has become stronger with his new arm. With a feint, the protagonist destabilizes Ile, giving him the opportunity to land a punch on his face. However, before even landing the protofaro and claiming his victory, time passes as he looks at the horizon. Ile dismisses the idea that he could finally defeat him. Fruta says he has obtained new parts beyond what he already had to develop further. His friend says, it seems that he is fairer now. After that speech, the belt ranking seems to have had a great impact. Protege agrees and says he has experience serving as an Imperial Guard, meaning he would be welcome anywhere. A friend says that he is in a position where birth does not matter, so he should relax a little. Protege responds that the difference is that he has no place to return to. Understand? He has to keep rising, and it is simple because of that. He has talent, but he lacks drive and asks why he wants to become a soldier. Looking at the sky, his friend says that he only wanted to be a scholar, an archaeologist, to study the ancient arcane civilization. Ile asks why he does not do what he wants. A friend says that it is forbidden in the Empire. Studying the arcane civilization is prohibited. Besides, his family is producing multiple generals. They will never allow him to do anything else. The professor asks if he is upset because he cannot do what he wants and calls him a spoiled brat. He reminds him that countless people in poor neighborhoods have no guarantee of living another day, many of whom are just grateful to have something to eat. Ile says he thought he would say that and tells him that he just revealed a secret to him. Protege warns that if someone took what he said as criticism of the Empire, it would ruin him if anyone reported it. However, he is confident that he will keep his secret. He says he will not do it because he will keep it just as he keeps his own secrets. Prota says he did not kill him simply because he was not an opponent. With a macabre expression, Protege claims loyalty to the Empire and the Emperor for recognizing his talents. He states that the enemies of the Empire are his enemies, and that includes him as well. However, his friend leaps from where he was and calls him a liar. Down below, he says that if his loyalty was truly to the Empire, he would have killed him. He then adds that he will not pressure him too much. Understand? Prota calls him an idiot and warns that he will die if he continues like this. They are on their third-year training mission, in an uninhabited neutral zone. Ile places his hand against a pillar, greatly surprised by an archaeological object in front of him. He comments to Porto about how amazing it is, coming from a civilization that explored the stars before humans even existed. He thinks he had traced Maria, but he never thought he would surpass her. He warns him not to let his guard down. This reconnaissance mission is part of their training, and if they do not find another master force there, it will turn into a fight. However, he remains excited about what he found. Another person approaches and says that the present exists thanks to the past, but the past does not allow one to predict the future. He adds that this is why so many people are interested in history. This person is from the guard and is called Claudio. Prota recognizes the young man and also knows his family. The young man asks if he can ask a question. Prota raises his guard, suspecting the boy. However, the boy tells him not to worry. He only wanted to introduce him to his little sister. Because of that, he is just an orphan. The boy says that whether he likes it or not, he will probably end up being his superior, even though he keeps thinking about how beautiful his sister is. While they are distracted, talking, their eyes detect a biological reaction. Quickly, their group disperses, positions itself, and begins to investigate the situation. Moving further ahead, they notice something. Surprised by the blinding glow, with a mix of fear and shock, Prota realizes that it is a Korite paladin. The paladin, unaware of their presence in the forest, throws his weapon at them, fearing the worst due to his immense power. Prota shouts for them to scatter, but unfortunately, Claudio ends up directly in the path of the paladin's attack. The strike is so powerful that it not only pierces through Claudio, but also the massive pillar of the ancient civilization that stood behind him. With his overwhelming strength, the paladin makes his spear return to his hand in the blink of an eye. Claudio lies on the ground. Proda recalls his conversation with him, but is utterly shocked. He never even saw the attack, only the radiance of the spear as it took the upper half of his body. Fear takes hold of him. Proda's system begins to register errors, his eye reporting a failure, unable to track the trajectory of the spear. Simultaneous ones continue without options. The protagonist's friend and two others. They attack the paladin, who easily protects himself from their attacks with a pill. But the protagonist is sweating cold. He realizes that if they engage in this fight, escaping will be impossible. Alone, there is only one way to face them. Hold on until the Imperial Guard arrives. If they endure just 12 seconds, they will be safe, as an Imperial Guard member watching the area will appear. The seconds pass, agonizingly slow. But the paladin has already launched his strike against the protagonist. Determined, the protagonist manages to defend himself. However, the sheer force of the blow instantly knocks off his helmet, leaving a small wound on his face. He tries to block again, but the paladin redirects his strike, this time aiming for a direct hit. Facing death or darkness in that instant, he remembers the commander's words. Give everything against the enemy. If the enemy brandishes their sword, you must do the same. Summoning his willpower, the protagonist defends himself against another attack from the paladin. With great determination, he strikes at the paladin's spear. In a brief instant, he manages to cut it, sending it flying and crashing to the ground. His armor is nearly completely destroyed, and he realizes he can no longer use his hand. However, he succeeded in blocking the spear. Looking at the paladin, he prepares for the next attack. The paladin, now without his spear, draws his sword. With just a flick of the blade, a cutting light beam instantly slashes one of the protagonist's arms. The paladin prepares to strike again, but his allies step in to protect him, sacrificing themselves. At the last moment, the paladin swiftly teleports in front of him, preparing a final blow. But the 12 seconds have passed. The watchful guard appears at the last second. Swiftly, the Imperial Guard arrives and sees the protagonist standing face to face with the paladin. With just one hand, the protagonist is barely holding on. The paladin, whose helmet had already been shattered, quickly regains his stance. The guard, now in position, draws his blade. A powerful battle is about to begin. The protagonist watches as the two warriors clash, their swords colliding with immense force. A crushing pressure fills the air as they exchange strikes at incredible speed, dodging and countering with unparalleled precision. The fierce duel shakes the forest, leaving the protagonist in awe and slightly apprehensive. Could the guard truly win this battle? Yet, the Imperial Guard continues to assert his overwhelming strength against the paladin, pushing him back. The paladin, seeing his options dwindling, uses his remaining strength to control the fallen spear near the protagonist. At that moment, a terrifying thought crosses the protagonist's mind. If the paladin uses his speed and power to catch the guard off guard, he could die. And he cannot die. He is their last hope here. In a lightning-fast motion, the spear hurtles toward the Imperial Guard, but the guard blocks the attack, then slams the paladin to the ground, landing a decisive blow to his head, defeating him at last. Lying on the ground, shattered, the protagonist wonders if they have truly won. Unable to grasp the final outcome, he can only pray that the Imperial Guard has prevailed. The guard confirms victory, saying he managed to defeat the knight thanks to the protagonist's help. When the knight asks if the protagonist was wounded, he explains that he was injured while dodging the paladin's forceful strikes. Raising his hand to help the protagonist up, the guard prepares to return to the base. The protagonist, still in shock, gets a closer look at the knight's armor. Every tiny part of it is a weapon. A suit of armor that every apprentice dreams of having. On the ground, the prota says that he is just a machine and not human, confused. Out of nowhere, the Imperial Guard begins to feel confused, hitting the ground. Suddenly, he kneels, and he himself remains on the ground with the vision of the monstrous Imperial Guard. The cold protection, his body does not stop trembling. He wonders if he will really be able to survive, while he also thinks that this will be his last vision in his life. However, Ile suddenly arrives and asks if he is still alive. For another, he is glad that he survived. He responds by saying that he is not in the best condition, but all the others have died. And what is serious are the protagonist's wounds. On the ground, the protector, who is ready to die, calls out, asking what he will do now. If he looks ahead, the life he has always envisioned is before his eyes. Ile asks if this is the direction of Koriti and Balato. The protector says yes, and that what he desires cannot be found in the Empire. But he is fine. Today, reinforcements will arrive soon. Once they meet them, they will need to return to the Empire. But Ile stands up and moves forward, while the other thinks that he comes from a throne with guaranteed wealth and fame, along with a recognized skill that any citizen of the Empire envies. And he cannot understand what Ile was thinking, but when he spoke of his dreams, his eyes shone. Closing his eyes, he only wanted him to live well. But suddenly, Ile returns with a cloth on the prota's abdomen. He says that acting this way worries him, that he might really die. He tells him that there is no way he can live freely if he watches him die like this. The prota calls him an idiot. The ship arrives for the rescue. The prota, now fully recovered, reads a magazine. Suddenly, his friend arrives and asks if he is looking for new parts, and recommends a model F-24, with a good adaptation period, being much better than what he was looking at now. The prota thinks he might not appear that way or be frightening. Ile chuckles. After returning to the Empire and completing his training, the prota was called to different departments for an investigation. They wanted to talk to him about the case where 3 cadets and a member of the Imperial Guard were murdered. What the protagonist thought was that they wanted to investigate more deeply, but they called him for another reason. Ile remembers that they seemed to have found an artifact in the place where they had gone before, making the protagonist realize that the cube was the reality behind all of it. The other asks who has it. Ile says they are forming a team to recover these artifacts. If the Holy Alliance refuses to hand over the historical field and the artifact, it is likely that a great war will occur. And his empire, for the battle against the Korra, the Balatas will benefit just by watching them fight. That was why there were so many smaller-scale battles. Not being interested in politics, he only wants to receive orders and fight. The prota says that this is what a member of the Imperial Guard must do. The Imperial Guard, when he was reporting about one of the members whose head exploded, the captain summarized to him that it was a phantom phenomenon caused by residual signals. He wonders if it was really just a phenomenon, as the captain said. He remembers that he reacted to his words before dying. That was not a phenomenon. There were questions that had no answers. He was not so foolish as to seek information that the headquarters refuses to answer. There is a beautiful place within the cadets' training facilities. The visiting room is created for cadets to meet with family and friends. And there he is, face to face with Lillian Ramones, Claudio's sister, to see him. He is surprised that she is there. He wonders if she is there to interrogate him about her brother's death. Since he was the leader at that moment, it was him. But she quickly dismisses that option, saying that if he thinks she is there to express her hatred, he is mistaken. She said that the moment her brother became a member of the Imperial Guard, the family expected that this news would eventually come. And she is there just to see Luca because her brother had spoken a lot about him, that he was a talented young man and friend among all the cadets. She asks if he was really interested in meeting with her. The prota asks if she knows where he comes from. Sipping her tea, she says she personally prefers this with less formality, and says that she seems interested in getting to know him. She asks if he objects. The prota says no. She asks why they don't make an effort to know each other better, but a process of questioning makes him wonder why her. She says, "Do you think this is what my dead brother would ask for?" and asks if this is not a good enough reason for him. She believes that he has much to gain from this relationship. The prota thinks that yes, this is not a bad offer. He has the opportunity to marry a woman, a golden opportunity, and if he manages to marry a noble woman, he will be closer to his goal. But he thinks that this opportunity to marry is too easy and has a strange feeling. And soon, he tells her that he has to refuse and gets up from the table, saying goodbye. As he leaves, he thinks that Ile was from a good family, but was stripped for trying to escape from the empire. He does not make a decision based on feelings, and he is sure that she will take it as an insult against the nobles. He hopes nothing bad happens, but she quickly stands up and runs toward the protagonist, grabbing his hand. She, completely flushed, says that she must have rushed too much, then asks that they remain just friends for now. The protagonist is shocked. After saying this, she runs away, utterly embarrassed, leaving the protagonist stunned by what just happened. He realizes that getting rid of her will be difficult. In the physical training room, the protagonist stands before an Imperial Guard, the instructor Lucha. The protagonist requested some lessons and said he wanted to learn from the instructor. The instructor states that when it comes to fighting, there is nothing that can be taught to make someone faster, no matter how many cadets try. The protagonist recalls his skills, but he sees that there are stronger people than him, making him declare that he won't accept not being the best among the cadets. The instructor tells him that there is no need to rush. The combat instructor for cadets is an imposing person, like the other instructors, but he is strong. He uses a low-power cybernetic body. Unlike the other Imperial Guard instructors, his is designed for daily use. Compared to the protagonist's recently replaced cybernetic arm, the instructor's is 10 times weaker. However, the protagonist's only disadvantage is that his entire body is cybernetic, meaning his biological parts are the most fragile. He admits that he cannot win against an opponent like the instructor, but he is confident and wants to train. The instructor sighs, saying that the protagonist leaves him no choice, then tells him to proceed. Immediately, without hesitation, the protagonist attacks, but the instructor easily dodges his blow, surprising him with how effortlessly he avoids it. The protagonist, with hundreds of high-speed strikes, continues to attack, yet the instructor keeps blocking. The protagonist wants to finish the training quickly, so he strikes with great speed and force. When he aims for the instructor's face, in the blink of an eye, he finds himself in the air, shocked by what just happened. As he regains his balance and prepares to kick the instructor's head, he is surprised when the instructor grabs his leg and hurls him skyward again. He crashes to the ground, completely immobilized. Lying there in shock, the protagonist wonders what just happened. He remembers the punch he was about to land on the instructor's face, but the moment the instructor touched his arm, he felt a strange sensation, as if he had lost control of his body. More precisely, after the touch, the instructor's cybernetic energy transferred into his body, making him tremble. He wonders what that was in that brief moment. The instructor explains that it is his self-defense method. The protagonist quickly stands up and asks if he can learn it, though his eye is bleeding. The instructor asks if he truly wants to learn after undergoing surgery, warning him that shortcuts always come at a price. They sit facing each other, and the instructor asks what the protagonist learned from the battle. The protagonist says that he felt his body move on its own and was out of control. The instructor tells him Archi's Victima, explaining that it is typically called the Archi combat method. The protagonist, still shocked, says that what the instructor just demonstrated was incredible and asks if he can implement it into himself, but the instructor says it is considerable. However, there is an evident problem in this technique. The prota asks what it would be. The instructor says, "I see that you are as intelligent as they say." Bought another question. "Maybe it's something cerebral?" The instructor says, "Correct." While for the last reason, currently, he does not know. Then, to another, he says he is willing to take this if he will become stronger. The instructor stands up and states that this is not for him to decide. The instructor asks if he knows how much money was invested in him. Then, using the Archi's method will inevitably cause problems in the brain. It may cause issues, but the instructor asks if he could help him, saying he will not use it unless necessary. The prota quickly says he could not swear, but will do his best not to use it. The instructor turns, rests on his shoulder, praising his honesty, and lands a strike, knocking him down. warning that from now on he will always present an attack, so that he is prepared for any situation. Seeing this, he orders him to get up immediately because he likes those who learn quickly. A month passes with a completely exhausted face. The prota's friend asks if he is sleeping well. The prota makes up an excuse. These training sessions with the instructor are quite intensive, hence the protagonist's exhausted face. To learn the Archi's technique, he is spending a lot of energy since the Archi's combat method is something entirely opposite to what he used to do before. It is as if it were a superior combat algorithm that uses all weapons and arsenal to have a more efficient combat method in seconds. It is a way of using the mind. The prota asks Ilay how his mission was. He says it was bad. It was about disposing of a malfunctioning android. All recent missions have been of this type. The prota says that the Corintios organization is being cautious due to recent incidents. He asks if that is why one of the bosses is around. The prota's friend says no, that it is not that. He overheard from some people in his family. The prota asks if the boss interfering could perhaps trigger a rebellion. He says yes, he does not have details, but a group of people is planning a rebellion. This leaves him completely shocked, making him furious because they are in the middle of a war against Corinthians, and some idiots want to start a rebellion, creating a civil war. Ilay says that if they simply ignore this, internal future problems could arise. Furious, the prota throws Ilay against the wall while shouting that he had already warned him. I can ignore it if you want to leave the Empire, but if you want to be an enemy, I cannot leave you alone. Without oxygen, pressed against the wall by the protagonist, struggling to speak, Ilay also went through the aptitude test to be an Imperial Guard, and thought he would not be important to the Empire. He asks the prota to calm down. The prota lets go and tells him not to make statements that could raise suspicions, because he does not want his name on the rebels list. To break the tension, his friend invites him to eat over the weekend. However, the prota says he has plans and tells him not to talk to him because he is being annoying. Curious, his friend asks if maybe it is a girl. Sometime later, in the lower sector, walking beside the instructor asks if it has not been too long. This is a familiar place for them who come from humble neighborhoods. The prota says that as the days passed, he thought he would never return to the lower sector because he did not want to breathe the same air as those idiots. The instructor says he understands because he is someone who knows high places. As he walks, the prota cannot believe he has been brought there. Some commotion happens along the way. The city is powered by thermal magma energy that is generated beneath it. All waste and heat are filtered and released in the lower sector. In his youth, when the prota breathed this air all the time, it made him feel that he needed to get out and not stay there, becoming a protector forever. Curious about being there, however, the instructor soon calls him. They follow a suspicious path until they reach the black market. It is the prota's first time in the black market. The prota encounters someone and wonders what the instructor is planning. They proceed until they reach two guards in front of a door. The instructor introduces himself. The guards block their way. The instructor introduces himself and claims to know their boss. However, the guards, not very convinced, point their weapons at them. But quickly, even before the instructor could do anything, the prota acts first, immobilizing one of the henchmen and pointing the weapon at the other. The background figure, raising his hands, is left with no alternatives. The instructor then says that there is not much he can do and that now he understands the situation. With his friend, he enters the place. The instructor says that this place is the coolest place in the entire Empire, the Colosseum.